What do you want with me? 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 What do you want with me?
All right, y'all, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Hope everybody having a good day. About to get this thing started. We got news coming up at 10. So it's 8 minutes. to the top of the hour. Let's get ready for the new hour. Let's go and measure my range for the 9 o'clock hour. It's going to be my step-by-step process for my opening range trade, how I take it. Yes, if I would have took it earlier from the 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock setup, ES 1 point ran up from 54.75, 5 points. Stuff right here. Two minutes to the news drop. Powell testifies again at 10. Trump and the NATO meeting starts at 10. And new home sales comes out at 10. 45 seconds to see what we get. I could have been done already if I'd have been. If I would have chose not to go record. Try to start recording at 9:30. Start getting issues at 9:30. Miss my entry at 9:30. Ten seconds, we already know the level. Equilibrium of 9 o'clock. Be 5:17. Equilibrium on ES will be 155. So we can remove this now. Indicators show my levels. First trade will probably fail. I just took the setup. Really thinking we can come down first. Kind of hard to believe we'll push up from here. But I took the setup. Not trusting it, but knowing I can get this money back if it lose. First trade out the way. Get the jitters out. Should have been looking down. That's cool. See what they're gonna do about this 4-hour gap we left in this buyout this morning. $55, 2 points of heat. Should have took both of them. Well, I am held up. Only NQ failed me. Hard to expect price action to be anything but erratic when Trump on TV. Would decide to record again. Trump want to bring his ass on TV. Damn. Down to 50% of the previous 4 hour. And a 15-minute gap. $22,481 is the level for NQ. Equilibrium of the 4 hour. Equilibrium of the previous 4 hour candle. 481. Almost perfect. Digging deep with this 15-minute candle. You got rejected at the 4 hour EQ. 481. Q hitting today. And Q hitting, I just gotta take it.
Coming in, is coming surprised, actually. I thought we would have had that settled easy. I've settled 4 of them in the meantime, but he did call up and he said, he's close to Iran. He'd like to help us get a settlement. I said, no, you help me get a settlement with Russia. And I think we're going to be doing that too. Yeah, please. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You've made clear your position on what impact the strikes had. I wanted to ask you what is next with Iran. For instance, is there any indication from U.S. intelligence that Iran was able to move any material?
No, just the opposite. We think we hit them so hard and so fast they didn't get to move. And if you knew about that material, it's very hard and very dangerous to move. It's called in many people, they call it dust, but it's very, very heavy. It's very, very hard to move. And they were way down, they're 30 stories down. They're literally 30, 35 stories down underground. Oh yeah, we think it's covered with granite, concrete, and steel.
Are you interested in restarting negotiations with Iran? And if so, have they responded?
So our people, Marco could answer this, but our people are not, I'm not. The way I look at it, they fought, the war's done, and, I could get a statement that they're not going to go nuclear. We're probably going to ask for that, but they're not going to be doing it. But they're not going to be doing it anyway. They've had it. They've had it. Now, maybe someday in the future we'll want that. But I've asked Marco, do you want to draw, I just asked him the question as we were walking on the stage, do you want to draw up a little agreement for them to sign? Because I think we can get them to sign it. I don't think it's necessary. Marco, do you want to talk about that, please?
Well, Mr. President, I think President Trump has shown a willingness to meet and talk to anybody in the world who's interested in peace. I don't know of any president that's been as willing as he has to meet with anyone and talk about peace. We'd love to have peaceful relations with any country in the world. And so obviously that'll depend on Iran's willingness not just to engage in peace, but to negotiate directly with the United States, not through some third country or fourth country process. But I know of no president, probably in our modern history, that's sought peace more than President Trump has.
Sounds like you're in no rush. Is that right? Sounds like the door's open.
I'll tell you what, look, we're going to talk to them next week with Iran. We may sign an agreement. I don't know. To me, I don't think it's that necessary. I mean, they had a war, they fought. Now they're going back to their world. I don't care if I have an agreement or not. The only thing we'd be asking for is what we were asking for before about we want no nuclear, but we destroyed the nuclear. In other words, that's destroyed. I said, Iran will not have nuclear. Well, we blew it up. It's blown up to kingdom come. And so I don't feel very strongly about it. If we got a document, wouldn't be bad. We're going to meet with them, actually. We're going to meet with them. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Mr. President, Netherlands TV, thank you for visiting our country.
Good.
As I understood,
Thank you.
I, of course, like to know how you slept last night at the House of the King.
Oh, I slept beautifully.
But probably a more serious question. I think you just had a meeting with President Zelensky. Did you discuss any ceasefire in this Russo-Ukrainian?
No, I wanted to know how he's doing. He was very nice, actually. Yeah, we had little rough times sometimes. He was, couldn't have been nicer. I think he'd like to see an end to this. I do. I think what I took from the meeting couldn't have been nicer, actually, but I took from the meeting that he'd like to see it end. I think it's a great time to end it. I'm going to speak to Vladimir Putin, see if we can get it ended. But look, these are brave people. They're fighting these wars all over the place. You know, last week they had, I guess, I told you, close to 7,000 young soldiers, Russian and Ukrainian soldiers were killed, 7,000 in 1 week. It's crazy. It's crazy. So I'll be speaking to Putin. No, I had a good meeting with Zelensky, and I had a lot of good meetings. We had a lot of good meetings with a lot of people, a lot of great leaders. But he's fighting a brave battle. It's a tough battle. Yeah. Go ahead, white dress.
Thank you. Ida Hallikainen from Finland, Ilta-Sanomat.
Good.
You have played golf with President Alexander Stubb. How do you see Finland as a NATO ally and partner, and how would you describe your relationship with our president?
Well, he's a very good golfer. Okay. In fact, he was on his college golf team. He went to a good college in the South, as you know, a very good college, and he was a good golfer. We had a good time. I think my relationship's great. I want to buy icebreakers. You know, you're very good at icebreakers. And I actually made him an offer. I didn't go to Congress. They'll try and impeach me for this. But there's an old, it's not old, it's fairly new, but it's used icebreaker. And I offered him about 1/3 of what he asked for. But we're negotiating. We need icebreakers in the U.S. And if we can get some inexpensively, I'd like to do that. Actually, they'll fix it up, make it good. Also, we may buy some icebreakers. You know, you're the king of icebreakers, that particular country. They make them good. They make them really good, and they know what they're doing. And so we're negotiating with them for about 15 different icebreakers, but one of them is available now. It's old, and it's, you know, old. It's like 5, 6 years old. And we're trying to buy it. I'm trying to make a good deal. All I do my whole life, that's all I do is make deals. Yeah, please. Go ahead. Sir, go ahead.
Yeah, a question for NewsHour, Dutch TV. First of all, on Article 5, on your way here, you spoke about the commitment of the U.S. to Article 5, saying, I'll give you my definition once we're here. Yeah. What is your definition, and may the U.S. commitment to Article 5 change in case some of the NATO members do not reach the threshold that was discussed today? My second question is following up on the colleague on Iran. What intel reports do say that everything over there was obliterated?
Yeah, well, there are numerous of those reports, and they're coming out fast and furious. But the most respected ones we've already seen. And I will say that on a very confidential basis, they're looking at the reports, like numerous reports, and including people going to the site and checking the site. And they're going to be having, I guess you're going to be having over the next couple of days you're going to encapsulate it. But no, the site was obliterated, just like I said it was. And just like the pilots should be given credit for. As far as Article 5, look, when I came here because it was something I'm supposed to be doing, but I left here a little bit differently. I said, I watched the heads of these countries get up, and the love and the passion that they showed for their country was unbelievable. I've never seen quite anything like it. They want to protect their country, and they need the United States. And without the United States, it's not going to be the same. And you can ask Mark, or you can ask any of the people that were there. It was really moving to see it. They love their country. They were so respectful of me because I'm the head of the United States. And I made, you know, the King of Saudi Arabia, when I was in the Middle East. So I was in Qatar for a different reason, not a reason to get shot at. We were in there for economic development reasons, Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. All three leaders of those countries, and we took back $5.1 trillion into the United States. All three leaders said, you know, you're presiding over the hottest country in the world. The United States right now is the hottest. Everybody wants to be there. Everybody wants a piece of it. He said, a year ago, your country was dead. You had
This
a
man
deadhead running it. You had a country that was dead, and it was dead. You had people pouring through the borders. You had inflation. You had everything. He said, you've made it in 5 months at that time. You've made it the hottest country. This is the hottest country in the world. The United States right now is the hottest country in the world.
The hottest
And when
country
I
in the
was
world.
around that table, it was a nice group of people, many of whom I knew from
Might
previous.
buy it for
When I
81.
saw the passion they had for the country, almost everyone, and you probably have the tapes, it was very public, but almost every one of them said, thank God for the United States. Without the United States, we
81
couldn't,
or 88.
they couldn't really have
About
NATO.
88.
It wouldn't work.
81.
It wouldn't work. It will in the future because now they're paying much more money, but
Let's see what happens.
it wouldn't work. It was great. And I left here differently. I left here saying that these people really love their countries. It's not a
Look
ripoff,
good right now.
and we're here to help them protect their country. Okay, we'll do one or two more.
Thank you, Mr. President. A question on Spain. Are you satisfied with today's?
Oh, I think Spain's terrible what they've done. No, I do. They're the only country that won't pay the full up. They want to stay at 2%. I think it's terrible. And you know, they're doing very well. The economy is very well. And that economy could be blown right out of the water with something bad happening. You know, Spain is the only country that, are you from Spain? Good, congratulations. You're the only country that is not paying. I don't know what the problem is. I think it's too bad. So we'll make it up. You know what we're going to do? We're negotiating with Spain on a trade deal. We're going to make them pay twice as much. And I'm actually serious about that. We're going to make Spain, I like Spain. I have so many people from Spain that it's a great place and they're great people. But Spain is the only country out of all of the countries that refuses to pay. And, you know, so they want a little bit of a free ride, but they'll have to pay it back to us on trade because I'm not going to let that happen. It's unfair. It's unfair to NATO. All right, sir, please. Go ahead, right in the back. Yeah, you tall one. The tall man.
There we go. Push it.
Mr. President, Johannes Petra from Austrian National
Push it,
Television.
baby.
How are
You
you?
once said that you would end the Ukraine war in 24 hours. You later said that sarcastically.
Well, of course it was sarcastic.
But you've now been in office for 5 months and 5 days. Why have you not been able to end the Ukraine war?
Because it's more difficult than people would have any idea.
I should have put two. on
Vladimir
there.
Putin has been more difficult. Frankly, I had some problems with Zelensky. You may have read about him. And it's been more difficult than other wars. I mean, look, we just ended a war in 12 days that was simmering for 30 years, frankly. We
let one
ended
out.
Rwanda and the Congo. It's coming to sign the documents. We've already signed basic documents, but they're coming, I think, to the White House on Friday. We ended, Serbia was going to go at it. But maybe the most important of all, India and Pakistan. And that
Pakistan.
wasn't whether or not they may someday have nukes like we're talking about in
Oh, man.
the Middle East, like we're talking about with Israel and Iran. This is, they have nuclear weapons. I ended that with a series of phone calls on trade. I
I'm
said,
trying to buy it up.
if you're going to go fighting each other, it was getting very bad. You know how bad that
Say
last
something
attack
good,
was.
Trump.
It was really bad.
He's
If you're going
saying
to go
nukes, I'm
fighting
trying
each
to
other,
pick it
we're
up.
not doing
That's
any
not
trade
good.
deal. No, you have to do a trade deal. I said, we're not
Trying to
doing any
trade while
trade
Trump
deal.
talking. It's also
And in
not
fact, I
good.
had the general, who was very impressive. The general from Pakistan was in my office last week.
Come on, Trump, say
you know,
something good.
Prime Minister Modi is a great
Coming
friend
out
of
of a
mine. He's a
1 hour
great
gap.
gentleman. He's a great man. And I got them to reason. I said,
Equilibrium
we're
of
not
the
doing a
4
trade deal
hour,
if you're going to fight. And if
6
you're going to fight
a.m.,
each
4
other, we're
hour.
not doing a trade deal. And you know what?
Candle.
They said, no, I want to do the trade deal. We stopped the nuclear
Equilibrium
weapons.
number 15.
Go ahead, Jeff. Here's another beauty, Jeff.
I gotta stop looking at YM.
He's a
Trip.
beauty, all right. Good.
Mr. President, to follow up on
I should've
Ukraine,
took
will the
ES
United
too.
States contribute any more money to
151.
Ukraine's defense this year to the $5 billion
Equilibrium
that
on
allies are
ES
giving?
is one
And one question, you had another
481.
meeting
They got me
with
in
the
at
Dutch opposition
484.
leader, Mr. Wilders. Can you
Yeah.
tell us about that meeting?
Market
And are you
entry.
upset about his anti-Muslim stance?
I'm not upset
Got
about
a
it.
buy
It's just
model.
his view.
Potential
He's
buy
not
model
happy
here.
with the way things are going in this
Close
country
the
and
ball
various
once,
countries.
close
He was
the
an
ball
opposition
twice.
leader. And I was asked to meet with
Close
the
the ball. This
opposition
order block.
leader
Make
by
it
the
nice.
people that are running. I think they have some deal where if you have a meeting, you're supposed to meet with an
Make it
opposition leader. I said,
nice.
that's strange. We don't do that, but I met, I didn't know him. He seemed like a very nice guy, but he's in opposition to the current people, and that was set up by the
Make
current
this kind of
people.
push
So
up.
I assume when I met with the prime minister, you're supposed to meet with
it's gonna
the
get ugly.
opposition. We'll have to try that sometime in our country. Let's not do it. But he was,
Make
I
this
thought he
kind
was
of
very good.
push
As
up.
far as the money going, we'll see what happens. There's a lot of spirit. Look, Vladimir Putin really has to end that war. People are dying at levels that people haven't seen before for a long time. Go ahead. Go ahead. White shirt. Oh, she's all excited.
So,
Like for him not to
BBC
come back
News
to 481
Ukrainian,
again.
I would
Where are you
like to
from?
ask you- I'm from Ukraine.
Oh,
So my
wow.
question to you is whether or not the
Gotta
US
nuke
is ready
Ukraine.
to sell
News
anti-air
reporter.
missile systems Patriot to Ukraine. We know that Russia has been pounding Ukraine really heavily right now.
Are you living yourself now in Ukraine?
My husband is there,
Wow.
and
I can see you're very, it's amazing.
me with the kids. I'm in Warsaw actually because he wanted me to.
Is your husband a soldier? No?
He's
He's there now?
Yeah.
Wow. That's rough stuff, right? That's tough. And you're living here?
in Warsaw.
And you're a reporter?
I am.
Good. So let me just tell you, they do want to have the anti-missile missiles.
5-minute
as
level
they
is
call
at
them.
517.
the
I need
Patriots.
Price to get it back
And,
above
we're gonna see if we can
517.
make some
Stand on
available,
top
you know?
of
They're
it,
very hard to
strong,
get.
and keep
We need them
pushing.
too. We were supplying them to Israel. And,
Come back to
they're very
517.
effective, 100% effective. Hard to believe how effective. And they do want that more than any other thing, as you probably know. That's a very good question. And I wish you a lot of luck. I mean, I can see it's very upsetting to you. So say hello to your husband, okay? Thank you.
50% of the 9 o'clock candle. 917. I need Price to get back above here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
And it
President.
could reject here.
You were criticizing.
Where are you from?
But I like
Bloomberg
for it to
News.
close above with a
Oh,
body.
You
That's
were
wonderful.
Take out his
you were
buy side.
criticizing the Federal Reserve Chair before coming
Take
to
out
this
buy
summit.
side
I think
here.
it's terrible.
I was wondering if
Close
you've
above
begun
it.
interviewing
It'll probably
different candidates
retrace.
for the Fed.
Scare
pick.
people
Yeah,
out.
I
And then
know
keep pushing.
within 3 or 4
For the
people.
next
who
buy
I'll
side.
pick. I mean, he goes up pretty soon, fortunately, because I think
Yeah.
he's terrible. We have no inflation. We have a tremendous
That'd be
economy.
nice.
Hundreds of billions of dollars of tariff
Let's do
money
this
is
real
pouring
quick.
in. Factories are being
'Cause that
built
was the
because they don't want to
entry.
pay the
That was
tariffs,
the
so they're
start.
building them all over the country.
2R.
I think we're close to $15 trillion. I told you 5.1 trillion
Yo,
from the
2R
Middle East
here.
alone, but of investment
3R.
money coming in. There's never been
Right
anything
there.
like that in the history of our country. But we have no inflation. And we have borrowing because Biden stupidly, they did short-term debt. So we have
3R.
borrowing coming up. And, we'll go 10 years, maybe longer, maybe
points.
shorter, but we'll go a long period of time when we do the debt. And because of him, because of this guy,
There we go. I needed that
we
candle
will
to
have
go
to
in the
pay
gap.
for
Push up.
years
Close
we'll be
above
paying
these.
for
Down.
him.
Close candles.
and I said to him, listen,
Come back in.
there's no inflation. He says, well, maybe
Implied
there'll be
gap
some.
with the
That's true.
wicks.
I said, if there is
Continue
some,
pushing
what
up.
you do is raise the rate. I'm
That's
okay
what I need
with
to
that.
see.
You raise the rate in 2 years from now or a year from now. But because the rate's
Should've
high,
put
we have to
2
pay
on it.
more for debt. It's pretty equal. In other words, if it's 4%, it's 4%. If you drop it a point, you'll pay 3%. So it's fairly equal, not necessarily, but fairly equal.
Water blocks
So
over
we're
here
going to
getting
end up paying maybe
respected.
2 points or 3 points more. 3 points would be about $900 billion a year because of this very average mentally person. He's an average mentally person.
That's
I'd say
3R.
low in terms of what he does, low. Low IQ for what he does, okay? Wait, so instead of paying $900 billion, we don't want to pay 900 just because he doesn't want to lower the rate.
These order blocks
I
right
said,
here need to
if
hold up.
there's inflation in
Hold
2
price
years
up.
or 3 years or
Come
1 year
down.
from now,
Tap
you
these order
raise the rate,
blocks.
you take care
Get
of the
above this
inflation.
order block. Get
among
above this
other
down
things.
close candle. There we go. Just like
But
that.
he's probably
like
a very
that.
political guy, I
That's
guess.
what I
don't know.
need.
I think he's a very stupid person, actually. All right, one more. Let's go. How about you? Go ahead.
There we
So
go.
happy and
Last
everything.
question,
That's
baby.
what
Get
you-
Trump off the
Thank you.
television.
I'm Anabu from La Vanguardia. I wanted to
Get
know
this
if
man
where
off the
from?
television.
Spain.
Ah.
I wanted to know if you want to.
That's the Spain corner right there. Shouldn't have said that. That's okay. I do like Spain, by the way. I think it's unfair that they're not paying, but go ahead.
Are you going to negotiate directly with Spain about?
I'm going to negotiate directly with Spain. I'm going to do it myself. They're going to pay. They'll pay more money this way. You should tell them to go back and pay. You're a reporter.
There we go.
You tell them to go back. They ought to join all of those
That's what I like
countries
to
that are
see.
paying 5%.
A nice
Spain's
immediate
gonna be just
rebalance,
about
come
the
back
only
and
one
test the
that's
open
not.
and just push.
They were the most
That would be
hostile
beautiful.
toward doing it. I just
No more
doesn't
playing
make
down here.
sense to
Just
me.
test the open.
Okay,
502.
all right, Kelly, go ahead.
Push.
Here we go. Here's another one.
It's not good.
Thank you
We
very
got them all today.
See what we got going
So,
on.
Mr. President, you talked about expecting some on-the-ground assessments at Fort
What's
Dodge.
going on?
Yeah.
ES needs to
Okay.
get
Yeah, we
above.
get-
And
155.
US.
It's been obliterated, Kelly. It's been
What is your message then,
And
sir,
Q
to the
needs to
intelligence
above
community when they present
517.
reports? You're not disputing the DIA report. You're just,
They presented a
exists.
report that wasn't finished. We're talking about something that took place 3 days ago.
I understand that's.
The report was done
So
2
what
days
is
ago.
your-
Wait a minute.
Yes.
They didn't see it. All they can do is take a guess. Now, if you take a look at the pictures, if you take a look how it's all blackened, you know the fire and brimstone is all underground because it's granite and it's all underground. You don't show it. But even
That man
there,
said
with
fire,
all of that
brimstone.
being said, the whole area for 75 yards around the hole where it hit is black with fire. The group that's run by this gentleman, in fact, you may want to talk about it for a second because we're going to issue a report. And I think it's not even a very exciting report at this point. It's been obliterated, totally obliterated. And they did a report, but it was like, if you look at the dates, it's just a few days after it
Understood,
happened.
sir.
So they didn't see it. They said it may be very severe. Go ahead.
Understood. Do you have a message for the intelligence community, though, in terms of unvarnished information getting to you, that it's not?
I don't really have a message. I would say issue the report when you know what happened. I wouldn't say that it could be severe or maybe not. They use the word severe. It could be severe or maybe it's not.
And
So people like you picked up and said, oh, it's not severe.
We're just-
No, the report was not a complete report. Yeah, the message was probably wait till you know the answer before you.
And
Go
sir,
ahead.
did you not have a public component to your Zelensky meeting for a tactical reason with President Putin?
Let him answer.
Hello, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah. There's a reason the
There we
president
go.
calls out fake news for what it is. These pilots, these refuelers, these fighters,
There
these
we
air
go.
defenders, the skill and the courage it took to go into enemy territory flying 36 hours
Come
on
on.
behalf of the American people and the world to take out a nuclear program is beyond what anyone in this audience can fathom. And then the instinct of CNN,
I
the
really
instinct
did
of the
myself
New York
an
Times
injustice not
is to
playing
try to find a
more than
way
one contract on
to
this.
spin it for their own political reasons to try to hurt President Trump or our country. They don't care what the troops think. They don't care what the world thinks. They want to spin it to try
Win
to
or
make him
lose
look
on this
bad
trade.
based on a leak. Of course, we've all seen plenty of leakers.
I'm
What do
not
leakers do? They
satisfied.
have agendas. And what do? Do they share
should
the
have put at
whole
least 2 or 3
information
contracts on
or
this.
just the part that they want to introduce?
At least.
And when they introduce that preliminary, a
One
preliminary
contract on the
report
first trade
that's
was
deemed to
understandable.
be
'cause I really
low,
didn't trust
a
it.
low assessment. Do you know what a low assessment
Trust
means?
this one.
Low
Should
confidence
work.
in the data in that report.
Just
And why
gotta
is
get
there low
above
confidence?
517.
Because all of the evidence of what was just bombed by 12, 30,000-pound bombs is buried under a mountain, devastated and obliterated. So if you want to make an assessment of what happened at Fordo, you better get a big shovel.
I would also
and go
say at
really
minimum
deep,
we should come
because
up to
Iran's nuclear program
507,
is
but we already did
obliterated.
that. So
And
I'm hoping we
somebody
push past
somewhere
the
is trying to
minimum.
leak something to say, oh, with low confidence, we think
We need to get
maybe
past
it's
this
moderate.
order
Those
block.
that drop the bombs precisely in the right place know exactly
And
what
that's a
happened
swing
when
high,
that
so we need
exploded.
to-
And you know who else knows? Iran.
We need to get
That's why
past
they came to the
50%
table right away,
of
because
that
their
candle.
nuclear capabilities have been set back,
Which would be
beyond what they thought were
520.
possible because of the courage
get
of
above
a commander-in-chief
520
who led
and
our troops, despite
517.
what the fake news wants to say.
But you're not disputing the report said what it said, even though it was initial.
The report said what it said, and it was fine. It was severe, they think, but they had no idea. They shouldn't have issued a report until they did, but we've gotten the information. I think Pete said it better than you can say it. And you
Yes,
know,
we
you should be proud, you, especially you, should be proud of those pilots, and you shouldn't be trying to demean them.
155 is a short entry for
with
ES right
great
now.
risk, a big chance that they'd never come back home and see their husbands or their wives. Let me just tell you, you
Trump
and
finna start
NBC
arguing.
fake news, which is
Here
one
you
of the
go.
worst,
Somebody done
and
pissed them off.
CNN, New York Times, are all bad. They're sick. There's something wrong with them.
Somebody
Do you know
done pissed
what?
them off.
You should be praising those people instead of trying to find some. By getting me, by trying to go and get me,
Here you go.
you're hurting those people. They were devastated. You know, I got a call from
Get this man
Missouri,
off the
great
television.
state, that I won 3 times by a lot. And I got a call that the pilots and the people on the plane were devastated because they were trying to minimize the attack. And they all said it was hit. But we don't think
Get
it
this
was
man
really
off
maybe
the
hit that
television,
badly.
man.
And they were devastated. They put their lives on the line, and then they have, and I'm not referring to you, but real scum come out and write reports that are as negative as they could possibly be. It should be the opposite. You should make them heroes and heroines. You should make them really people that they were so devastated when they heard this news. And you know what they said? One of them, I spoke to one of them, said, "Sir, we hit the site. It was perfect. It was dead on." Because they don't understand fake news, because they have a normal life, except they have to fly very big, very fast planes. But it's a shame. You should be making them heroes. All right, in the back. Go ahead, back, white, yeah. White jacket, yeah.
Boys, talk that talk, Trump.
Go ahead, give
Should
my
be
mic.
making them heroes.
Hello.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News.
Talk that good stuff.
Mark Rutte, the NATO
crazy
chief,
stuff.
who
There we go,
is your
ES.
friend,
Push through.
he called you daddy
There we go,
earlier.
ES.
Do you regard your
Damn, should've
NATO
had more
allies
contract,
as
bro.
kind
Man.
of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No,
Do
he
you
did. He
regard-
did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
Do you regard your NATO allies, though, as kind of like children, and they're obviously listening to you and they're spending more, and you're obviously appreciative of that, but do you hope that actually they're going to be able to defend themselves, defend Europe on their own?
I think they need help a little bit at the beginning, and I think they'll be able to. And I think they're going to remember this day.
All right, make a
And
break.
this was a
on
big day for
NQ.
NATO.
We gotta
You know,
get
this was a
above
very big day. They
517.
took it. One of the gentlemen said, "You know what? We've been trying to
NQ, we
raise
gotta
money
get
for
above
raise the rate
517. What we gonna do? ES
for
already
30
did what
years."
we
He said,
need to
20
do.
years, from almost the beginning. And he's been there for a long
Yes,
time. He
did.
said, until you came
Well, you
along,
know,
it never
NQ.
happened. What you did is amazing. It's
Top
been
to
sort
top.
of an amazing day for a lot of reasons,
Top
but
to
also
top,
for that.
NQ.
Yeah, go
Do
ahead.
you think
Go.
they can do it without you, though, in the future? Can they do it without
Well, ask Mark.
Top to top,
You have to ask
NQ.
Mark. Okay, so we're heading back. We're heading back. I want to thank these
Top
two
to
gentlemen
top,
behind me.
baby.
They're incredible people.
Here we go.
Both of them. They've
Don't
done a
reject right
fantastic
here.
job.
Don't reject right
and Susie's
here.
in the front, and she's done
Top the top.
great. And Monica, thank you very much. That
Pop
was
the
quite
top.
an
I
exciting
know they're trying
time.
to sell it.
Uh,
I know they're trying to
and
sell
we're going to be heading back.
517.
We'll be
They're
back
trying to
soon.
sell it. They
We'll
trying
see
to
you
sell
in
it.
Washington,
Pop
D.C.
'em.
Remember
Pop
this,
'em.
we have the hottest country
Right here,
anywhere in
push
the
hard.
world. Thank you very much,
Push
everybody.
hard, push hard, push hard. Damn, she put that on TV. What's gonna happen?
President Trump speaking at the NATO summit, talking mostly about
Push
Iran,
hard,
addressing
NQ.
some reporter
Come on,
questions
baby.
there, saying that the nuclear
Come on,
site has
baby.
been obliterated.
Oh,
He
man,
had his
I don't
defense
like that.
secretary there to back him up on that. He said, "We think the
Come on,
Iran-Israel
NQ. Push
war
hard.
is over." He said,
Push
"We've
hard.
collected intelligence since the strike that show that it is obliterated."
Push
He also
hard.
said that they're going to be speaking, the U.S. is going to be speaking with Iran next week, and they can maintain their position, which has been very
Let's get back
consistent.
on
He
this
said
bull
no
train.
nuclear policy. They may have
Come
some
on,
sort of
NQ.
agreement, said that that's not necessary. And then, David, he got a question from Bloomberg on the
Come
Fed
on,
chair.
NQ. Don't make me
and
sell
he
right
took
here. I
the
only got one
opportunity to continue
contract.
to
Dang.
attack him, called
That would've
him
been a
an
good
average
first
mentally
target.
person,
Perfect first
low
target.
IQ for what he does, a stupid person, totally disagrees with his policy, and also made fun of him, actually mocked
I don't
him
like that.
for saying, "Oh, inflation might come. We don't have inflation right now."
I
He said,
expected
so
that,
Powell
though.
should be cutting rates and
I
helping
said
us
that
when it
earlier.
comes to these very high
Get up
interest
right here.
rates.
Well, of course, the
Free
Fed chair is
trades.
testifying before the Senate Banking Committee. But again,
Make
nothing
people
new
get
there
out.
in terms of the president's
People
rhetoric.
excellent orders.
No, nothing
People
new, just
shorting.
continuing to pile on. Megan Casella is with us
Let
to
this
help
be a
break
order
down
block.
what we
Next
just heard.
candle
Megan
coming
went
to the
after
gap, push
Spain,
above.
continued to praise NATO
Come
for
down to the
increasing their
order block,
defense
push
spending.
above.
I'm curious what else you took on.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, most of this was on Iran. And there was one point that I think was the biggest headline from this news conference was the president saying that he did not care whether or not we had a formal agreement with Iran with them
Man, that would have
pledging
been,
not to
that's a
create
nice
nuclear
trade from
weapon. He
84
says
to
he doesn't think that
517.
needs to
That
be
was
put in
perfect.
writing. He did say that
I
he'll
just
be
want
meeting
more.
or at least talking with them next week, but he doesn't care if there's an agreement or not. That was a direct quote. So a big headline there and a big shift in that tone. He said maybe sometime in the future we'd want that, but at the moment he doesn't think it's necessary. On the Powell point or the Fed chair point, I did think it was interesting that for the first time publicly he confirmed he has
15
begun
minutes. We went into
interviewing
a
candidates to
15-minute
replace
gap.
Powell, and he says he thinks he's within 3 or 4 candidates. He knows who he's going to choose, suggesting there's forward momentum there, and that despite just how much time is left in Powell's term, I think it's about 10 or 11 months at this point, they are moving forward on that. Maybe we will ultimately see an early nomination. The other thing on Spain that I would flag, he's very angry because Spain is the one country that did not commit to this spending pledge to increase their defense spending. He was saying that he would make Spain pay in any trade deal because of that. He can't make Spain individually pay in trade negotiations because the European Union negotiates as a bloc. So it's only something that would be a punishment towards the entire bloc. I'll note, he can't do it towards Spain individually, but this is one more thorn then in the side with Europe. We already know those negotiations have been tough. It's one more thing that's on the table there.
Megan, I was going to ask you about Spain, and you made the point, of course, in terms of the potential negotiation. That said, we're dealing with a stock market right now that is not as focused any longer on the war between Iran and Israel, and perhaps will be refocused again on tariffs in July 9th. And the lack of trade deals, at least at this point, with so many of the countries that we thought might be close, whether it's India, South Korea, Japan. The EU doesn't seem to be. What are you hearing, or what are the expectations in terms of where we stand right now?
What we know is that they do keep saying there's one thing after the next that's been sort of
30
filling the
seconds.
administration's plate ahead of the trade deals. First, it was the dust up with China that required everyone to go to Geneva and then London a few weeks back. They said that was why they hadn't gotten side deals. The latest we've heard this week is that the big, beautiful bill and those negotiations with Congress are now taking up some space, and that the trade deals will come after that. It's also very possible, of course, everything that's been going on in the Middle East has been a distraction as well. So I highlight all of those because they've been talking about all the things they've been doing besides negotiating trade deals. They say that's why we haven't gotten these side deals yet. Of course,
All right,
other
we gotta
countries
get
say it's
above
because the
501.
negotiations aren't done or they're not going well. There's different issues with each trading partner. That's
Get
all to
above
say
it, or
that
they
when
gonna
we get to
reject?
this July 9th deadline, we've already heard the Treasury Secretary say
Damn.
if negotiations are ongoing, they might postpone it. I think it's very possible, and there's increasing expectation, I would say, that we
Damn,
will
they ain't
see
want
the
that.
deadline extended, at least for some trading partners. It's definitely not set in stone, but part of me thinks that that's what they're laying the groundwork for here when they talk about all the things they've been doing that's distracted them from the trade negotiations.
I mean, market doesn't seem worried about it, right?
That's what
Megan, thank
happened when
you.
you trade
Megan
one
Cassell. The other
contract.
point I would just make, we're about to hear from Fed Chair Powell again yesterday, and his comments, he's very unfazed by the political attacks from President
I
Trump.
ain't
He's
even
had
talked
them
about
before.
Powell.
They're definitely getting louder and more intense now, but, just sticking with, we're doing what we need to do for the American people within our mandate. And I would also note that even the Republicans, and we'll see what we get from Senate banking, have not been overly aggressive toward Fed Chair Powell. He's done a lot of work sort of winning a lot of respect on Capitol Hill. So with that, we'll take some more questions and answers for the Fed chair from the senators. Let's listen in.
We're working on all that right now. We're also going to, we have a proposal out to sort of smooth the results of the test from year to year. So this is something we're working on hard and expect to have important progress later this year when we begin to publish the models.
I'm anxious to see it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ricketts.
Now we got
Thank you, Mr.
Powell on
Chairman.
TV, man.
As we were talking about tariffs a little bit earlier, the senator from Virginia talked about Australia. I will point out that Australia has, we bought about $28 billion worth of Australian beef, and they've bought exactly zero of ours. So there's an opportunity to be able to improve that trade relationship. So that's one of the things I hope will come out of the trade negotiations.
You will acknowledge there is, though, a trade, we actually have a trade.
We actually have a trade surplus with Australia, that is correct, but we'd like to sell more beef to them. So that's an opportunity. But one quick question on that, kind of just following up on Senator Kennedy's line of questioning. So
8
if a tariff
minutes.
was put in place
10 o'clock CE
and the
would
prices
be
went up,
497.
wouldn't that be a one-time
On the
event,
hour, we still coming
right?
out of a
Because
1
after
hour
that,
gap.
it would be baked in. It's just a one-time
Still got
thing.
that 481
So it
level.
might well be, as I indicated in my opening remarks, it might well be a one-time event, but that isn't a law of nature. We would want to make sure of that. We were more sure of that back in 2018. because we'd had, 40 years of low inflation. Coming off of a global inflation episode where we haven't fully returned to 2%, it's something it's a question we will approach carefully.
But if the tariff is only put in once and just maintains the flat rate there, then how could that be inflationary in the second year?
Well, because it could be a process of many years. I mean, that's a couple of things. One is if it comes in quickly.
If this
and it's
5-minute
over
counter flip, I might take it back
very
up.
likely it's a one-time thing, like an oil shock, a one-time oil shock where the price comes back down, it goes through the system. It doesn't raise inflation, just raises prices once. But if you have a process that goes on multiple shocks for years, for example, or if the shocks are very large, that kind of thing. And I think, again, we have to be conscious of the current situation, which is people haven't seen 2% flat inflation for some years now, and it's different from what it was in 2018 when we had tariffs earlier, when we actually cut rates. So I'm not saying we're not reacting at all of this. It's a risk we feel like as the people who are supposed to keep stable prices for the benefit of the American people, we need to manage that risk too. That's all we're doing. We're not deciding what to do yet.
So if Senator Warner's comment that a tariff is a tax, would that imply that then taxes could be inflationary as well?
No.
So what's the difference between a tax and a tariff? Or do you disagree with Senator Warner's characterization that tariffs are not taxes?
I wouldn't disagree with that, but it's not the language I use. As I say,
You keep asking this man the
one-time
same
database
question.
but in
Like,
a situation like this where the process could go on for a
y'all
long
do this
time,
shit
where the effects could
every
be larger for some
couple
people,
months.
it's just something you want to approach
Dang,
carefully in a
stupid
world where
question.
inflation is not back to 2%. And that's our
And
job.
Powell ain't gonna do
We made a
nothing but
mistake
keep
here.
saying the same
That
thing he
will
been
make
saying.
costs for a long time.
Like, what y'all trying to
So
trip the
we're just
man up?
approaching the question carefully. That's all we're doing. You know that, a majority of my committee has said that they do expect to cut rates between now and the end of the year in the remaining 4 meetings. So it's not that we're, taking a strong view that it will be inflation and not a one-time cost increase. It's
Well, I
just
don't like
that we're
that
going to
shit.
take a careful approach to that very critical question.
What this 5-minute counter gonna
Let me
do?
switch gears on you a little bit. Communist China is our single greatest threat to America's national security and financial independence. Now more than ever, the U.S. must ensure the security of our financial system against Communist China's malign influence. In 2022, Senate Homeland Security
Should've
and Government
waited on the
Affairs
short.
Committee released a report identifying efforts by
517.
Communist China operatives to infiltrate the Federal Reserve System. The report contained
Not
real-life
even 10
examples of
points
Communist
lead.
China's attempts and tactics used to target Federal Reserve officials. In late January, a former senior advisor to the Fed Reserve was arrested on charges that he conspired to steal Federal Reserve trade secrets to benefit and advance Communist China's interests. This Wall Street Journal article from May 2025 details the potential ramifications of his actions. The kind of data and trade secrets that this Fed Reserve employee shared could allow Communist China to manipulate the U.S. market and advance knowledge of changes to the federal funds rate. It could provide Communist China with an advantage when selling.
Setup says short at 500.
Chairman, has the Fed Reserve made any changes to strengthen its internal counterintelligence and security protocols since the development of these incidents?
So that's an incident, and I would say we take it very seriously. We have quite elaborate and serious and strict provisions around staff access to information, serious protections for confidential information. We have background checks. We have annual training. We have many of those things. I don't know that we've made any fundamental changes, but we're certainly, sorry, very sorry to see something like this having taken place, and we're certainly looking at the protections we have in place.
Great. Well, I have another question, and we'll just submit as a QFR, but I know the chairman said you got a heart out, so I'll go ahead and yield back my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Chairman Powell. Good to see you. I want to start by acknowledging the continued uptake of.
If we don't get above 497, we're going down.
System. I know I've raised the development and rollout of that system with you in many, many hearings over many years. We're now about 2 years after launch. I want to continue to work with you and your colleagues to encourage expanded adoption of the capability and capacity so that customers have real-time access to their money. So I just ask that we continue to work on that together. You agree?
I do.
I thought you might. Thank you. So I want to ask you about the student loan situation in the country. And you've talked about this in the past, and you've talked about how it can be a drag on the economy, especially when it gets to be very high in terms of balances that cannot be paid. According to the New York Fed, student loan balances grew by $16 billion to reach $1.63 trillion in the first quarter of this year. Data shows an uptick in the student loan delinquency rate overall, the age of delinquent borrowers, and the number of newly delinquent borrowers. Department of Education, meanwhile, restarted debt collection activities last month. And starting in July, nearly 2 million borrowers could see their wages being garnished. Meanwhile, here in the Senate, President Trump and Republican senators are working to pass this piece of legislation that would limit affordable loan repayment options and make it harder for borrowers to responsibly repay their debt and get back.
Short at 500. What they gonna do with that?
So, Mr. Chairman,
don't
you
like
said
it.
before in your
I mean,
testimony
it won't work.
that student loan debt can
I'm
negatively
liking this
impact
loan
borrowers' ability to
at
fully
497.
participate in our economy, and that it can weigh
It'll present
down
itself in
on the
2
economy
minutes.
overall.
1
Is that
minute.
still your view?
Yes, it is.
And could you just share your assessment, just from a factual perspective, about how this problem seems to be growing at this point in time, and what would happen if we allow all of these borrowers to default?
So the point I was making, I try hard not to comment on things that aren't Fed policy, but I broke that rule in this case many years ago, and so I'll just say what I said then, which is, you can make all kinds of investments, and you can discharge if you can't pay back the loan, you can discharge it in bankruptcy. But the one exception we make is student loans, and I ask whether that is wise national policy. People that borrow to invest in their education, that we do not forgive. It seems like something for Congress to consider. That's
So
all.
the
It's not
trust
a-
you're
not
short
a
from
Fed's
500.
business, really.
They're
Ultimately,
at
it's not a
$200 right now.
macroeconomic thing, but I've said it before. I've said it again.
Mr. Chairman, I
So the
appreciate
trust
you
is
bringing
short.
your open rapport. I appreciate
Do it again.
All right, go to 10 o'clock level.
I cannot agree with you
Equilibrium.
the
We
anomaly
below it.
in the ability to discharge the debt in bankruptcy. The idea that student loan sort of is the one category of debt that we don't allow to be discharged is confounding. I think, unfortunately, so far, it's been a sign of the power of some of the companies involved in that area. And I just came from another committee where I'm ranking member, so I apologize if you already talked about the tariff situation. But I know this was obviously a factor that you all had to consider in making decisions about changes in the interest rates. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty in the economy. I mean, I hear it every day from Marylanders. We have the Port of Baltimore. We have lots of small businesses that rely on tariffs. You're an economist. You know that increasing tariffs is like increasing taxes across the board. But can you just speak to the uncertainty component of all of this and how that is weighing on people's decisions?
The surveys show very widely that people feel uncertain about the economy, and they do point to tariffs in that answer. I will say, though, that actually peaked
Powell
back
ain't
in
Powell ain't
It's
gonna
come
say
down
shit to
a
help
little
us
bit.
out.
If you talk to businesses, I talked to an unusually large number of business people in the
He need to
last
get his
couple
ass off the
months.
television too.
The feeling is a little better now than it was. They're getting on
Get
with
this
it.
man off the
Feeling-
television. I guess he'll probably be down around
I'd say
12.
surveys are still showing depressed sentiment, but it's moved up from where it was.
I would say, Mr. Chairman, that may be the case at this moment, but we all know that we could wake up any morning and see another tweet, and that could change dramatically. So I appreciate your efforts to try to do what you can to meet your dual objectives. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Senator Lummis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Chairman Powell, for being here today. As you know, what always vexes me and has for the last 4.5 years about the Federal Reserve is the bank supervision function as opposed to the monetary policy function. So I'm going to focus on bank supervision. First of all, I do want to thank you and Vice Chair
down.
for ensuring reputation risk has been removed from the bank supervision process. It was very arbitrarily used by those who were supervising. On January 27th, 2023, I'd call it the high watermark for Operation Choke Point 2.0. Federal Reserve Board, in coordination with President Biden's White House, executed a coordinated attack to isolate the digital asset industry from the banking system. And while the Fed has taken steps to adopt a more balanced approach to digital assets, which I appreciate, the legacy of January 27th, 2023 remains with us today. So I'd like you to look at this quote. It says, issuing tokens on open, public, and/or decentralized networks or similar systems is highly likely to be inconsistent with safe and sound banking practices. So my first question is, do you recognize this quote?
Yes, not super clearly, but yes, I do.
Because it's from the Federal Reserve Board's policy statement on Section 913 of the Federal Reserve Act, which was formally adopted by the board on January 27th, 23. So now, Chairman Powell, I want to show you another statement, and I'm sorry if you can't see it clearly, I'll read it to you. It's from the Genius Act, which just passed the Senate by a vote of 68 to 30 last week. And it takes the opposite position to the board's policy statement on issuing stable coins on an open, public, distributed ledger. So my question is, what has changed about the risk of stable coins since the board adopted its policy in 2023? And now that the Congress has weighed in, at least the Senate has weighed in and sent the Genius Act to the House, does the board plan to withdraw the policy statement on Section 913?
So I think what has changed is, if you go back, that's a couple of years ago, that was the period of high-profile failures and fraud and that kind of thing. And what's happened is, I think, the industry is maturing, our understanding of it is improving, and in a sense, it's becoming much more mainstream. So all of us are revisiting, the things that were done during that era. And I think the current view is that, that it's appropriate for, it's always been appropriate for banks to choose their customers and to be able to undertake activities as long as they're safe and sound. In terms of, I think, I have to get back to you on 913. I think it's a broader thing that has nothing to do with crypto, but that was a piece of it. We are looking at and withdrawing many of our pieces of crypto guidance from that era, though, as you know.
And I appreciate that. I hope that by withdrawing the guidance, that you're also instructing and admonishing your bank's supervisors to, when there are efforts to regulate banks that provide too much discretion to bank regulators to pick winners and losers from among the customer lists, the loan portfolios of banks. It's antithetical to the American system of banking. And I do think that there was that kind of discretion unleashed on
We do have
banks,
Tuesday's equilibrium down
had
there
a negative impact of
at
a real chilling
256.
impact on banks as they selected and banked certain industries.
If
and
Powell
then
just go on and
debanked
tank it.
other industries and other people during the last 4 years. So taking the guidance documents and policy statements out is important. but also
Powell gonna make us crash up.
guiding the people that there are changes now and that they can no longer use their own subjective biases towards DEI and ESG and other things in supervising the banks is also a critical component of bank regulation.
I agree completely. And as you know, Vice Chair Bowman is actually a former bank supervisor, so she's very well placed to make that happen.
And I realize that she as vice chair is more directly involved in bank supervision. I hope that you will use your role to punctuate the importance of those changes within the bank supervision function at the Fed.
We're going to have to move on.
Thank you.
Some of your answers. Yes. Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Chair Powell, and welcome to the committee. So, Chair Powell, a few months ago, you issued a warning about the trajectory of our national debt. Speaking at a New York Times event, you said the U.S. federal budget is on an unsustainable path. The debt is not only at an unsustainable level, but the path is unsustainable, and we know that we have to change that. Would you still agree that that is true?
Yes, that's the one thing that I would always say, and that my predecessors would say, and that's the only thing we say about fiscal policy.
Exactly. And I would agree with that at a time when Americans are struggling to figure out how to afford their lives and have low confidence in the economy. To add to the deficit now, as the big beautiful bill does, just strikes me as unsustainable. Now, I'm not asking you to moderate between Republican and Democratic policy differences on the big beautiful bill, but would you agree that the big beautiful bill adds to the deficit based on the data that you've seen?
I'm just not going to comment on the reconciliation.
Okay. Well, I will just point out to my colleagues that the CBO says that it adds to the deficit. The Joint Committee on Taxation says that it adds to the deficit. The Yale Budget Lab says that it adds to the deficit. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget says that it adds to the deficit. The Penn-Wharton budget model says that it adds to the deficit. And even some of my Republican colleagues, Senator Johnson, Senator Paul, say that it adds to the budget. And as Senator Johnson says, it's wrong and immoral. So I appreciate that you won't comment on any of this, but let me just ask you an economic question. Can you talk a bit about what impact a rising deficit has on our goal of lowering costs for Americans, especially in the Trump tariff environment that we are in right now?
Sorry.
What impact does a rising deficit have on our goal of lowering costs for Americans, particularly when we are in this Trump tariff environment, the unpredictability of that?
I think it's likely that when markets are pricing longer-term Treasury securities, there's something baked into that in the market's thinking about interest rates. What should be the appropriate interest rate? But it's hard to unpack that with any precision.
These are factors that have lots of interplay between one another.
Yes.
Yes. And Chair Powell, could you just comment briefly about the potential risks of stagflation, where we have slower growth and higher inflation? I know this is something that the Fed guards against, and could you just comment a bit on the risks of that and what it means for regular Americans trying to afford their lives?
So we're not seeing that now.
Yeah.
It isn't really the base case that that's what we're going to see. But of course, that's a very difficult thing because, a stagnant economy wants more stimulus, but an economy with more inflation wants less stimulus. So it puts the central bank in a hard place. We've warned of it, but it's honestly not something that we're facing or that we expect to face. But it's something we're monitoring is what's happening.
Thank you. I want to follow up on a question I asked you the last time you were before the committee. I asked about the impact of severe weather events, otherwise known as climate change, on home insurance costs. And you testified that, I think you said, if you fast forward over 10 or 15 years, there are going to be regions of the country where you can't get a mortgage because of the impact of the challenges of insurance companies just not being able to provide that. Since February, when I asked you that question, home insurance rates have continued to climb. A recent analysis about climate risk from First Street found that financial burdens from severe weather are driving up household costs and triggering increased mortgage defaults. Now it's at about 8% now, but they project that by 2035, 30% of all foreclosure losses would be related to climate impacts, which is like pretty stunning. Now I realize this is a complicated issue because insurance is regulated primarily at the state level. Though there are exceptions, flood insurance and terrorism insurance are exceptions. But I wonder if you would comment on this. I'm thinking a lot about what impact this has on housing costs, which is a big component of inflation and a place where housing costs are rising higher than the general inflation rate right now.
Many things are driving up housing costs.
Yes, that's true.
It's of course mortgage rates, but it's also zoning costs and things like this for properties that are near the water. Particularly, for example, we spend some time down in Florida. Property insurance just gets more and more and more expensive, and to the point where it almost makes sense to self-insure, and that's because of just big losses. Companies are just putting that in their models, and they're charging what they need to to charge to make a return. And if they can't get that, then they'll leave that state. So that seems to be what's happening.
I know I'm out of time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
You're always polite.
That's why they call me the Velvet Hammer, sir.
I didn't say that you weren't harsh as well. You're just nice when you do it. Like just right now. See, Senator Moreno reminded me not to give Tina a compliment in the middle of the thing.
Chairman Powell, just want to make certain I understand this correctly. Control inflation and maximize employment. That's it. Two things, correct?
Yes.
So let's take one at a time. Maximize employment. Do you care if every American makes minimum wage or makes a livable wage? Is that something that factors into your thought process? In other words, we have full employment, but most Americans are on substandard wages. Does that change your calculus?
Does it change my what?
Calculus. In other words, is it full employment is full employment? Every American has a job, but they're making minimum wage versus having a family-sustaining wage. Does that matter to the Federal Reserve?
It would matter to the country a lot.
I'm saying, does it matter to the Federal Reserve when you're making your decision?
Honestly, we don't really have the tools to affect that.
Right. So it doesn't factor in. Now that's different than us. People in this country elect us to make certain that their wages are higher than inflation. And by the way, the records show that real wages are up this year. So we've done that, not the Federal Reserve. Second piece of it is, let's talk about inflation first.
Well, we've helped control inflation, which is part of that.
We're going to jump right into the inflation conversation. There's different kinds of inflation. There's different causes. There's not witnesses to inflation. There's key actors to inflation. Would you agree?
Sure.
Okay. So let's talk about the actors. Did you comment during COVID lockdowns that was a bad idea, meaning that you're shutting down the entire economy? It's not a button. I hit the button, you can hear me. It's on and off. COVID wasn't that. We just shut down the economy. Any comments on that?
Of course not.
Okay, so you didn't comment on that. Vaccine mandates, something that my Democrat colleagues loved. If you don't get the vaccine, you're a terrible human being. You can't go to work. In fact, Joe Biden was overruled by the Supreme Court because he said that if you work in a company with more than 100 employees and you don't get vaccinated, the company has the ability to fire you, unless you prove that you're negative on COVID. That obviously is a supply chain shock, wouldn't you agree? If I'm running an assembly line and now I have to put my people 6 feet apart and now I have people quitting or not coming to work or I have to fire them, that's a supply chain shock, wouldn't you agree?
I mean, it's a medical thing that you.
No, but it's a supply chain shock.
George Washington.
I'm not asking you to make a medical decision. I'm asking you to make a Fed decision on inflation.
Way outside anything we would come.
But it affects inflation because supply.
It didn't.
Are you saying that supply chain shocks don't affect inflation?
They do, but that
okay, they do.
didn't.
So that's clearly one. If you ban the export of liquid natural gas, which is going to cause the commodity price to go up, would that the supply shock not also cause inflation?
Potentially could.
Yeah. So, and now the ranking member loves to talk about billionaire corporations, that are going to get away with paying taxes, right? Who pays corporate taxes? Like, who pays it? Is it like some obscure Wizard of Oz character behind a curtain that is a corporate entity that pays taxes, who pays taxes?
I mean, ultimately, it's shareholders and customers.
So it'd be, I'm going to read you a line. You tell me this is accurate. On taxes, it's not possible to know in advance precisely how the cost will be shared for taxes. I added
Correct.
that.
I would
But it is highly likely that consumers will pay a meaningful share. Meaning if the ranking member has her way, let's just tax corporations at 100%. Why not? Be fantastic, right? Oh, nobody would want to start a company, but that aside, that cost would be added to consumer products, correct?
A tax or a tariff? What are you talking about now?
If the income tax for American corporations goes up, they will share that tax burden with their consumers. True or false?
Yeah, ultimately.
Yeah. So then taxes do raise inflation, but you don't comment on.
I mean, they haven't.
And you don't. But you don't.
Not true. I mean,
I got
empirically, it's not true.
The chairman's going to beat me up in 56 seconds. So, but you sent me a very nice letter, which I appreciate. And it says the Federal Reserve plays no role in commenting on trade policy. So you don't comment on supply shocks. You don't comment on tax policy, which clearly affects inflation. You don't comment on demand pull. You just said now that we should forgive student debt. Why is a person that goes to Harvard, that gets a gender studies major, pays Harvard obscene amounts of money because professors are grossly overpaid there, is that person better than a working class Ohioan that is a plumber but can't afford a car because interest rates are too high and car prices have gone up? Why is that person? Why don't we forgive that person's car loan instead of forgiving their student loan? But you don't comment on that. You comment on tariffs. So I'm going to just show you.
I don't comment on tariffs at all, actually. I comment on
only
inflation.
commented on tariffs. You've
I'm
only
commenting on the
tariffs.
wisdom of tariffs.
Look, the chairman's over there at the conversation. I'm going to
They
show you a
poking
chart
holes
here.
at
This
everything.
is car prices.
Powell said,
This is car prices since this year.
trying to get
Car
that man
prices
fired.
are down. Car prices are down. Inflation in America is down. We got elected by millions of voters. You got elected by one person. He doesn't want you to be in that job. And you are costing this government $400 billion a year by refusing to lower interest rates. Nobody in this chamber has that kind of power to have a $400 billion impact on this economy, on our deficit. And I just think that you should consider whether you're really looking at this from a fiscal lens or a political lens, because you just don't like tariffs.
Senator Warnock is next.
Senator.
Thank you, Chair Scott, and thank you, Chair Powell. Good to see you. The United States national debt currently exceeds $36 trillion.
This 5-minute candle couldn't
Last year,
hold
we paid
50%.
nearly $1 trillion in interest on
candle
the
that
debt
made the swing.
alone, more than
So
the
I don't
federal
trust the
government
swing.
spent on
Maybe go lower.
educating and feeding our children. Chair Powell, how does the Fed
Gotta get
consider
above 50%
rising
to swing count.
national debt levels during discussions about adjusting interest rates?
We really don't. We take fiscal policy as
Now you gotta
completely
get above
exogenous,
50% of this
and we
count.
look at the data that's coming in, but we don't.
We're going down.
We're never going to take into account
Swing
budget
candle.
deficits and things like that.
Next candle.
Here's my concern. Maybe Congress should be
50%.
thinking about it. The world is losing faith
Vote
in
57.
America's ability to repay our debt. We have seen a sell-off in the bond market.
Yeah,
The United States
146.
dollar has lost more than 10% of its value against the euro and pound, and is down against nearly every single major currency in the world. Back in May, Moody's downgraded the U.S. government's credit rating because of growing debt and sinking confidence in lawmakers' willingness to address this issue. Historically, high debt pushes up interest rates, slowing economic growth and setting up a dangerous debt cycle where both interest rates and debt continue to rise. Chair Powell, how does the size and the trajectory of the national debt affect the Federal Reserve's ability to manage inflation in good economic times and spur investment and hiring in slower economic times?
I'm happy to say that today, those things do not affect our ability to do our job. The concern really is that if we don't do something, then there will come a time at which it will be a problem, not for us, but for the country. But that at this time, it does not interfere in any way with our ability to do
That is a realistic concern in the future, given the rate of increasing debt. And it's something I'm concerned about, and maybe because it's in the future, maybe that's why, folks who have power, who sit in these jobs, aren't as concerned about it as perhaps the Congress should be. I'm concerned about it as a father of a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. I'm concerned that my Republican colleagues are planning to ram forward a bill that, according to the Congressional Budget Office, will increase the deficit by $4.2 trillion. So I want us to think about that. We're taking food out of the mouths of hungry children. This bill could cut as many as 16 million Americans off of health care. When we think about Medicaid, 71% of the Medicaid recipients in Georgia are children. So we're taking their health care, and then we're saying to these children that you'll have to deal with these trillions of dollars in debt one day. $4.2 trillion increase. Senate Republicans are trying to use a budget gimmick to claim the bill only costs a fraction of that by simply not counting things they don't want to count. If they don't like the math, they just change the formula. But the markets and those investing in our country don't care about these budget tricks. And I don't think it will help my 6-year-old and my 8-year-old when the bill comes due on this. They know the truth, and they will react based on the truth. The big ugly bill will put the United States on a disastrous fiscal path, and it will be catastrophic for our economy. Even worse, the big ugly bill is cutting people off of their health care, and for what purpose? To give tax cuts to the wealthiest. So this is an interesting moment for me, for someone who didn't know I'd end up in politics, who just paid attention to politics over the years. They're getting ready to create a whole lot of pain for a lot of people. And the question is, for what purpose? To give billionaires a tax cut. I think we ought to work together to prioritize extending tax cuts for the working class. We shouldn't be cutting their health care. We ought to save the country trillions of dollars by not giving more tax breaks to the richest Americans. And if we try to work together, we can save our economy from this disaster and still protect working families from a tax hike. I believe in tax cuts. I think working class Americans ought to receive them. And we ought not be burdening our children with all of this debt. With that, I yield, and the chairman should take note that the Baptist preacher is done with 3 seconds left.
And the people said amen. Okay. Senator Haggerty.
Thank you, Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Warren, for holding this meeting. And Chairman Powell, it's good to see you here again. Chairman Powell, I want to talk with you about inflationary and deflationary trends in our economy and how they impact your thinking. I understand, based on your testimony and recent statements, that you're acutely sensitive to the inflationary risks of our administration's trade policy. And though I note that it's not the Fed's responsibility to attempt to steer or to directly offset that policy in any way, I look at that. I look at your perspective, but I also look at many of the other developments in our country that I think present the opposite risk, which is a disinflation risk. And let me dig into this a bit. We're witnessing artificial intelligence adoption at breakneck speed. That's going to bring about productivity gains in nearly every aspect of our economy. We're about to pass a tax bill. That tax bill is going to encourage capital expenditures and long overdue upgrades to our manufacturing capacity, again, increasing productivity. And if you think about the concerted effort that's being undertaken by our federal government right now to reduce waste and bloated, unproductive government payrolls, all of these point to disinflationary productivity gains. So given the competing sources of uncertainty that we're talking about, it feels to me like the Fed's far more focused on tariffs and the inflationary impact of tariffs than on the deflationary impact of the points I just mentioned. So if uncertainty around tariffs is the primary reason that impacts your thoughts, I mean, how do you counter, how do you bring into account these disinflationary trends that I've just mentioned?
So we do look at the overall picture, and that's actually what's been happening is services inflation's been coming down, and that's been covering what we see so far, small increases in goods inflation. I would also mention a factor that you didn't mention on your list, which is regulation, which is an area which could also be over time disinflationary. So we get that. I
Deregulation.
mean, there, you know, I try to say that it's the broad sweep of policies and the broader economy that matters for inflation. I get asked about tariffs a lot, and that's the one where all forecasters are expecting, you know, a significant increase between now and the end of this year. We don't know how big it's going to be. We don't know when it's going to come, but it's just something that we're waiting to see more information on so we can make a better decision on interest rates. That's all it is.
Well, I hear the discussion about not knowing the magnitude and the timing of the trade talks and the resulting tariffs that will ensue. It does seem to me that there's a bias toward viewing this as more inflationary than deflationary. And I'd like to ask you this. If Ambassador Greer is successful at bringing the trade deals together soon and alleviating that uncertainty, what would that do to your perspective on rates? Would that put you in a position to think more aggressively about lowering rates?
Yes, potentially it would. I mean, really, it's reducing uncertainty would help, and also just what's going to be the final tariff rate and getting that settled. And I think that's the path we're on. You know?
I think that's welcome news. I think the markets will welcome that as well, because I do believe that we're on the path, as you're about to say, of having some significant resolution in trade uncertainty. We've lived in an unbalanced world for years, with the United States has had the lowest tariff barriers in the world, and you know, other nations have taken advantage of that. Jameson Greer and this team, Scott Bessent and his team, the president, everyone is making a concerted effort to fix this. So I'm looking forward to that. The one other area I wanted to touch on, because it's touching close to home, and that is legislation that this committee has just passed out and that we've just passed in the Senate. It's to do with the Genius Act.
They don't get
which was
below
passed last week.
458.
And it provides an urgently needed regulatory framework for payments.
This short might not work out.
And it requires that they're backed one-to-one by cash or short-dated U.S. Treasuries.
ES
Over the
needs to
last
get
5
below
years, the
146,
total
so
value
this
of
short
outstanding
might not work
stablecoins
out.
has increased from approximately $4 billion to over $2 billion today. One market participant has predicted that if a framework like the Genius Act is adopted, total
Take
issuance of
lows.
unpaid stablecoins could reach nearly
25
$4 billion
points.
by the end of the decade. So I wanted
$500
to
if they take the
Mr. Chairman,
lows.
what impact would this new source of demand for bills have on the yield curve? And in particular, what impact would it have on short-term rates?
You know, so more demand is going to have a tendency to drive down rates. I don't really have a sense of how big that effect would be, of course. And let me just say that it's a great thing that we're making progress toward a stablecoin framework.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I couldn't agree with you more. The direction clearly is that it's going to bring rates down. I think it's very positive for the economy, positive for our cost of borrowing as a
man.
nation.
That's
And,
where it
I
get tough.
appreciate your response there, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
258. It's a buy level.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Powell, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here. I want to follow up on a question from Senator Warner about data deterioration. I'm concerned about that as well, that the Trump administration
Interested in the shorts right now.
that business and government leaders rely on. So my question to you, are there specific research projects that the Bureau of Labor Statistics provided that they no longer do provide, that the Federal Reserve researchers cannot replicate on their own or through other sources?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay.
That doesn't mean they don't exist, but mainly it's the regular data they supply. And as you know, they've cut back on the size of that survey.
Could get ugly right here.
I would hope as we move forward, and not just in today's hearing, but if there is some other data or you're relying on data that you're not
Could
getting,
get ugly right
another
here.
source for
And
that
I'm here with
data,
one contract
I
again.
would please share
Should
that
have had
with
two,
me.
so I could have let one off right here.
During the Biden administration, the Federal Housing Finance Agency and the Federal Reserve worked together to improve access to the discount window for banks. What is the status of that collaboration?
It's gonna
with
get
the,
ugly for somebody,
FHFA?
either for me or for the
I can't
loans.
speak to the FHFA. I can speak to the
Yes,
fact that
ain't
we're
looking good on the loan
really looking
side.
carefully at modernizing the discount window.
And Q isn't either.
and making
But we're not there
investments.
yet?
No, it's going to be this is a project that will take some time. You know, it's the discount window needs to be updated and refreshed from a technological standpoint so that people can access it readily and that kind of thing. It's still a little bit behind the age in that respect.
Do you have a time frame that you're looking at to,
I'll get back to you. You know, it's
Okay.
something we've been working on.
or is there a funding impediment that is also
No.
addressing this?
No.
So, okay, if you could.
We're moving
provide-
ahead with it. I'll come back to
Okay,
you.
thank you. In March, the Federal Reserve, together with the FDIC and OCC, announced that you all intend to
I think we can get
repeal the
London low.
2023
Asia low.
Community Reinvestment Rule, Reinvestment Act proposed rule.
I think they can run down for Asia low. I just hope NQ take it.
Needs of states like Nevada. that
Yes,
don't
definitely
have
closer.
headquarters of large banks. How will you ensure that the new CRA guidance improves access to financial services, to loans, to investments in underserved rural and tribal communities?
Nice,
March, we
nice,
announced
nice
that we're going
short,
to
nice short,
We're putting out
nice
for
short,
comment, really,
nice
proposal
short.
to withdraw the proposed guidance, which has been the subject of litigation. And in the meantime,
Oh
we're
man, don't do
going
that
back
to
the
me.
old
I need to
CRA
lock something in this
I
time.
think that's where we will be. I
25
don't have
points.
anything more in terms of what we might change with respect to those old rules.
Keep
but
going,
that's
So
what
man.
the default are the old rules, and
Yes.
that's, those may be.
CRA as it
going.
existed before
Ongoing,
this
yeah.
proposal, which actually never took effect.
Right, okay, that's helpful.
Lock
Community
in
banks
10,
benefited from high deposits during the
$200.
pandemic. Since
Come on, keep
then,
going.
the net interest margin for community banks has fallen.
It's gonna be the second.
What,
No, I ain't even
what
finna
specific
talk that
challenges
up.
do you see
Keep going,
for
man.
banks, if any?
Come on, man. Stop
Community
playing
banks,
with me. Keep
We're
going.
very important. We want a banking system that has all
Keep
different
catching these
sizes,
nice entries. Look at this
shapes of
entry,
banks.
man. That's
And community
beautiful.
banks are absolutely critical. They know what's going on in communities and in a
Beautiful.
way that that the big banks can't possibly. So
Catch a
they're critical
screenshot
part
one
of our
time.
infrastructure, and I think they've been under pressure
over a little bit.
because, frankly, regulatory costs,
Screenshot one
fixed
time.
costs of regulation have gone up. We try not to contribute to that. The number of banks has been going down pretty steadily, and that's not something we're trying to foster, but it's a sort of long-run trend of really the last 30 years. So we try not to add to what is a secular trend because we think they're important.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
All right, all right, all right. What we looking like on the higher time frame? We need to get down to Asia low, baby. Let's get down to Asia low, please.
Senator Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair. Chair Powell, thank you for being here with us today. I want to start just by echoing the comments of Senator Cortez Masto when it comes to community banks. Obviously believe that community banks and credit unions, financial institutions that serve everyday Americans and main streets across the great state of Alabama and our country are so critically important to people being able to actually achieve the American dream. And want to make sure, I know we've talked
We
about
don't
this the
need
last
no
few times you've been
pullback.
in
Just
front of
go.
us. We've talked about the rewrite of
Powell ain't saying nothing good.
talked about long-term debt. We talked about Reg II.
Just
We talked
go.
about a ton of things and talked about my concern that no one was looking at the cumulative impact of those things and the trickle-down effect. I just want to get a commitment from you that as you
We don't need no
across
pullbacks,
the
man.
board, that you will consider
Man.
and make sure to make
Fuck what I
the
want.
perspective of the smallest U.S. banks and non-financial industries like the ag sector.
1 minute
who
gap.
did not
Hold us
maybe have a
down,
seat at the
baby.
table in previous administrations, but give them a seat at the table and make
Should have
sure
locked
that you
in my
think about the
5. They
impact
tripping.
on those individuals and the people they serve.
I'm happy to make
One
that
of them days.
Thank you so much, Chair Powell. I also want to talk to you about an issue
20
that has been
points.
brought up briefly today by another colleague of mine. But
As
that
soon as I
is
lock
about
in, they're gonna
childcare.
tap me and
So
go,
when we
man.
look at the child care crisis in this country, we know that our economy loses about $122
back down.
billion a year
Get
because
back
of
down.
affordability and accessibility, reliability, if you will,
Get back
of
down.
child care. It is said that anyone who has a child between
There we
ages
go.
0 and 5
There
actually
we
spends
go. Get back down.
22% of their income on childcare. We have done the studies and looked at the numbers,
Check my
and
5 minute.
59% of stay-at-home and or part-time working parents
5
say that
minute
they
order
would like
blocks.
to re-enter
5
the
minute gap.
workforce, but that affordability or accessibility is an impediment to do that. As we are looking to build back America, as we are looking to create opportunity and bring those things
Hold us
into
down. 3
fruition,
minutes.
would you agree
Hold us
that
down,
taking a
baby.
look and being able to address, not asking you to comment on any
Hold it
specific
down for me. I'm
proposal,
trying to catch
but
this bag.
addressing some of the shortfalls related
No
to
retrace.
accessibility and
We're trying to
affordability
catch
of
this
childcare
bag.
and
The
how
Asia
a
low.
positive long-term impact on the economy?
Hold
I
it
think
down for
there's
me.
quite a bit of research showing exactly that, and we really saw it during the
Jeez.
pandemic, as I think you know and pointed out.
Come
it's
on,
not a
hold
role-
it down.
it's not
Hold
a
it down. Hold
issue
it
that we
down.
play a role on, but
Hold it
clearly,
down.
it would contribute. Childcare would contribute to
Ah, that's
participation
so.
in the labor force by many.
Absolutely. And as Alabama looks, we look at our labor participation rate. It is 5 points lower than the national average. We continue to look to ways to get people re-engaged
Get back
in the
down,
workforce,
man.
and know that addressing this head on will help us be able to achieve that. So thank you so much, Chair Powell.
That's so.
I look forward to continuing to work.
Damn, that's twice, man.
There has been some
Twice.
vocalized about the reconciliation bill.
Twice
and
that happened.
balanced trade policies.
Beautiful
From my
entries.
perspective, much of that skepticism is both unfair and premature.
Get these people off the
Market
television,
resiliency,
man.
And recent
Ruining
economic
my
data
day.
actually continues to reflect confidence in the U.S. economy.
Ruining
Looking at
my
the recent
day.
Treasury auction, which was notably successful and saw stronger than expected demands for 30-year
Get that man off the
bonds
television.
and stable, even with
Saying the
slightly
same stuff he
attractive
said
declining
yesterday.
yields. To me, this demonstrates that investors still view the U.S. debt as an attractive asset, regardless of the ongoing policy discussions and debates and
Damn.
forging a pathway forward. And those fundamentals of the economy, actually remain quite strong. Chair Powell, would you agree that the components of our economy actually remain quite strong? And how does the Fed consider this type of strong auction performance in the context of your market expectations and monetary policy discussions?
As you point out, the Treasury market is working fine just now. Liquidity is adequate, and bond prices are responding to economic events, and so bond market's in good shape. In terms of the strength of the economy, I would strongly agree. The labor market's in a solid place. The economy's growing. Inflation is in a pretty good place, come much closer to 2%. So it's a very solid economy. We are watching the labor market very closely, as we always do. And a couple of things in particular. One is just a very low hiring rate, which goes with a low layoff rate. But if we were to start to see layoffs, we would see unemployment go up quickly, and so we're watching that carefully. But we really the labor market has remained solid, and I would agree with your overall characterization.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here today.
All right, Fed Chair Powell testifying in front of the Senate Banking Committee, his second day on Capitol Hill in the semi-annual testimony. Not really saying anything much on the market that would move the market when it comes to monetary policy. Not getting a ton of monetary policy questions, but he just reiterated what he has said many times, including last week at the Fed meeting, which is the labor market is in a solid place, very much in a wait-and-see mode when it comes to cutting interest rates and judging whether there's going to be inflation as a result of the tariffs. Mike, stocks are a little bit weaker today, but not sure that Powell's saying anything one way or another.
No, they were wobbling early.
Finally got Powell off TV, man. Shit. All this damn volatility.
Oil's up a little bit, yields are
Trump
bouncing.
damn Powell. I should have stayed in my shit. Look how they pulled all the way back.
Justification of the wait and see.
All the way back to my
stance. He's
entry.
been pressed by a lot of the Republican members to essentially say, why do you feel as if you have to leave open the question of tariff inflation? And he's trying to say, look, we don't have an emergency to respond to on jobs. The economy is okay. And essentially trying to say, really not weigh in too much and trying to.
That's how it is. Trading when we got Powell and Trump on TV.
Yeah, but the bond market is not seemingly
Sucks.
responding very much to the
He doesn't
detail.
take the bait. I mean, they asked him about the
Sucks.
big, beautiful bill. He won't even say big, beautiful bill. He calls it the reconciliation bill.
Coulda
They
did
asked him
without
about
this shit.
tariffs. They asked him about the deficit. I mean, he will not judge. He will not take the bait when it comes to judging or even commenting or having any kind of headline around any of the
All this bullshit because Trump on TV. Then we get all this bullshit
Steve Leisman. Steve, did you
Powell on
hear
TV.
anything that investors should be paying close attention to?
No, all of this reminds me of, when you had those little
Alright.
balloons you used to hit as a kid and they would go down, then they'd come back up. They say inflation
Till
is
next
low
month.
and power goes down and comes back up. Yeah, wait and see. And they say deregulation and he goes back down, comes back up. He goes, wait and see. And you're right, Sarah and Mike. This has been 2 days of mostly
Wait and see.
Republicans
Man ain't gonna
trying to
say
hit
nothing
with this
different.
idea that you can
Keep
cut
trying to
rates
poke
and
holes in
Powell
the
said,
man's story like he finna
tariffs,
change.
wait and see in probably, I don't know, at this point, 50 or 60 different ways of him saying the same thing. They did go after him politically, saying, hey, you didn't say anything when Biden was spending all that money, and now you're politically against tariffs, and he says, wait and see. So
Wait and
that's
see.
pretty much where we are. Made a couple comments about the dollar. I do see the dollar weaker. I have a hard time
Powell don't like
connecting
Trump.
that to what the chair is saying. Also, some comments regarding deficits, and he did agree
God, he
it's
did
a
me,
problem
man.
on a long-term basis. Wouldn't comment on the big beautiful bill, as you said.
Yeah, wouldn't even say it by name. Steve, we heard from the president also in the last hour or so. He's at the NATO meeting, and he was asked by Bloomberg about his criticism of the Fed chair, and boy, did he keep the pressure on. Listen to what he said at the news conference.
I know within 3 or 4 people who I'm going to pick. I mean, he goes out pretty soon, fortunately, because I think he's terrible.
Terrible.
We have no inflation.
I'm
We have a
starting to believe
tremendous
it now.
economy. Hundreds of
Power
billions of
trip.
dollars of tariff money is pouring in. Factories are being built because they don't want to
Power
pay the
trip.
tariffs, so they're building them all over the country. I think we're close to $15 trillion. I told you 5.1 trillion from the Middle East alone.
There's
but
one thing with
of
just
investment
Trump.
money coming in. There's never been anything like
But
that
you
in
got
the
the
history of our
whole
country.
Senate.
There's the president repeating, Steve, the
Telling this
criticism,
man,
the insults.
lower interest rates.
About Chair Powell, he thinks interest rates should be lower. He thinks he's a stupid person because we don't have a lot of
All right. Enough of that.
president. And then did indicate that they're talking to a few people about next Fed chair. I mean, this is
New 15-minute candle in
Yeah,
2 minutes.
First of all, it is pretty extraordinary watching
my
the
lover
chair
early.
exercise the statutory or legal independence of the Federal Reserve. He doesn't react to the president. He doesn't comment on the president. I would also comment that the language in the Senate and House hearings were quite a bit different, much more deferential, not using that kind of language that the president uses. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's certainly
50%
remarkable that the language is
in
very
2
different. It wasn't called
minutes.
stupid
50% will
or
be
too late or anything
446.
like that. There is
50% will
pressure
be
on-
143.
Sorry.
They respect him. I mean, Congress has always shown him respect, both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, much more the way that you and I are used to having these hearings where there's plenty of room for criticism, but again, not that
Looking
kind
like
of
we could
language
push
being
up now.
used. I'd also just point out that he has a legal ability to do what he thinks is best, and that's what they're doing. And it's very important, I think, that the Fed chair is not saying he won't cut rates. Certainly, the market, if you look at the probabilities, guys, July is not really, it's up a little bit this morning. It's not really the bet of the market. And it's also, and then you see these greater confidence in September and December. Fed chair is not saying he won't cut interest rates. He's saying he needs to see what the inflationary impact is of the tariffs. And he did say that if there's more certainty, if there's more deals, well, that would help quite a bit in them getting to that place. Ultimately, I think the market doesn't really care if it's July or not. When I look at the trade there, and maybe Santoli wants to comment on this, there is no July trade in the market, not in the Fed funds futures. I would expect it's also not in the stock market. But there is a trade that, hey, the Fed rates will come down. There will not be a major inflation problem that will cause or require the Fed to cut to increase rates.
Right
I
there,
think
the
that's
open.
important. And I don't think the market really needs a July rate cut to be where it is right now. It is extraordinary. I will point out one other thing, Sarah, that I'm watching. It's a comment made yesterday by John Williams, which is the extraordinary disconnect from what businesses are saying sentiment-wise and what the stock market is doing. It's a bit like a manager of a team saying, I lost my main player. I'm really pessimistic about the outlook, and the betting market still makes that team the favorite. That's where we're at right now. We had our CFO council dinner last night. Of 10 people around the table, 7 were very concerned and remain concerned about tariffs and how it's going to affect their business. Stock market, apparently less concerned.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, look, the stock market is very confident in a handful of things. One is the AI theme, the strength and durability of it. Another is this idea that the consumer so far has given you enough evidence
late
that
on
it's
this entry.
resilient.
Very late.
And that tariffs, maybe it's out of sight, out of mind because there hasn't been a lot
Very
of fresh
late.
progress or news about that. But it seems as if the market's decided to price in a kind of a glass half full version
1
of what
point.
ultimately we end up with. So we'll see if those bets pay off. But you're right, the stock market is not sitting here on pins and needles about a July rate cut because they think the economy is in significant trouble. Steve. Steve, by the way, we do want to get to some breaking news here. Let's get to some potential M&A in the energy space. Our Brian Sullivan has it for us. Hey, Brian.
Well, it's potential M&A in the energy space, and it's a story in the Wall Street Journal, and it's moving some stocks. My phone may ring during this segment. If it does, I might actually pick it up. Okay, here's the story. The Wall Street Journal out with a story, Shell in early talks to buy BP, the former company, British Petroleum. It would be about an $80 billion deal if indeed this is done. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. This just broke just now. Okay, so I'm working to get in a hold of the companies individually, but I am also talking to people in and around the industry. Now, if you remember, guys, back in March, we had the CEO of Shell, Wael Sawan, on with us on Squawk Box. I asked him directly, would you consider buying a BP? Kind of danced around it. Obviously, no CEO is going to come out and say, yes, we would. But let's talk about why this deal might potentially occur, guys, which is that this would put Shell back into the Permian Basin. They got out of it. BP owns assets in Texas. They could possibly shed some assets by the combinations, their trading operations. For example, Shell has the biggest and I think the most profitable oil and energy trading operation in the world. BP's much smaller. You could sort of combine that, do a lot of work with Shell. You've got some assets out in the Gulf of Mexico as well that could potentially be combined. So, guys, Shell in early talks to acquire BP. You can see BP stock is up 7.5% right now. Again, we asked the CEO of Shell directly about this, trying to turn around that soundbite as quick as we can. This is all just happening real time. I don't think if a deal got done, it would be a surprise to anybody.
42, 46, 4 points.
As you mentioned, Brian.
$200.
All right. Well, so guys, can I run the soundbite because I don't want to speak for the CEO of Shell, Sarah. I know that you've talked to Wael Sawan many times as well. Back in March on Squawk Box, their Investor Day, this is what we asked the CEO of Shell.
We have a lot of running room within our own portfolio. We are able to grow 10% free cash flow per share between now and 2030 by focusing on what we do and what we do well. That's what our focus is. By the way, that doesn't mean we will not look at inorganic opportunities, but the bar is very high for
Q looking
inorganic
like they want to
because
shift
the alternative is to
to the
plow some of
upside.
that capital back into our own shares, which trade at an attractive free cash flow yield and whose risk that we really understand and we can control. And that's always the balance we're looking at.
Yeah, and Sarah, listen, size is everything in the energy world right now. You want to have that scale, especially if oil prices continue to go down.
Dancing
And BP
around
kind of
previous
lost
day
its way
high.
for a long time. They did this whole Beyond Petroleum campaign. They did heavy into renewables. That's a very European thing in far as basically getting rid of fossil fuels. They've repivoted back the other way, but the company has not performed like many of the bigger players have. And this combination, if indeed it were to occur, would be, I think, the biggest energy deal ever, or at least inflation adjusted since Exxon bought Mobil.
Okay, well, keep us posted on what you learn.
There's my phone.
Brian, after the report. That's a funny ring.
Should have been
Brian,
buying here.
Meantime, another big mover today. Look at shares of General Mills reporting an earnings beat, but revenue coming in just under expectations with a, quote, challenging consumer backdrop weighing on the company's
what they
outlook.
do.
Joining us now in a CNBC exclusive is General Mills CEO.
High
John
time
Hartman.
frame say we should go lower,
It's good
but
to have you back on. What are you seeing right now from the consumer?
for the
Sarah, it's good to
scalpers,
see you as well. And what we're seeing
looking like
from
we
the
can go
consumer
higher
really
from
isn't
here.
surprising. For the
Probably
last
up
few
to this
months or
gap.
so, the consumer really has faced a lot of uncertainty.
15-minute
And, a
gap
whole
at
variety of ways, whether
149.
it's economic uncertainty or
15-minute
uncertainty
gap
with
here.
tariffs or global conflict. I mean, we all know the list. And when consumers feel a little bit uncertain, they
at
tend
that.
to pull back on their spending a little bit. And so
And
we
this.
see that. I mean, it's one of the reasons why food at home consumption remains pretty robust. About 87% of food consumption is at home.
They don't get
Eating out
above
a little bit
43,
less,
it's over
but
for me
it
on this
also
trade.
means that we have to have our value right. So the consumer is still spending money, but they're certainly uncertain, and that makes for a pretty volatile environment.
So where does the business go? Does it go to private label? Is that where you
Fourth
lean
trade
to
was
in that
definitely
kind of
a
uncertain
mistake.
environment?
Well, one of the things we
That was a
found over
mistake.
this last year is that the consumers became a
First
lot more
trade I
value
took.
conscious. And so we've reacted to that, and over the last 6 months,
Clear
have
mistake.
made
All
significant
right, this shit over for the news. Fuck that. Tired of hearing news for the day. It's enough. It's lunchtime now. 2 wins, 2 losses for the morning session. Tough trading session with Powell and Trump on TV back to back. But that's what it is. Be back tomorrow, 9:30, man. Everybody be safe. Have a good day. Be blessed. I'm out.